Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction and also for highlighting the Swiss connection. Thank you, CESIAS and Department of Anthropology for co-sponsoring this talk. The themes of the dragon. Popular as well as scientific representation of Varanus komodoensis, or Komodo monitor, have provoked both public fear and admiration. This largest living lizard is found nowhere on Earth, but in several islands in eastern Indonesia, such as Flores, Rinca, Padar, and another island called Komodo. This animal has become celebrity species not only because of its size, hunting skills, and poisonous saliva, ancient origin, or rarity as endemic island species, but also because of the representation by American scientists, explorers, and the subsequent popular media as a dragon, a mythical animal that only exists in legends. You might be surprised to learn that there are people living side by side with the dragon in its natural habitat. It might be more surprising that those people consider themselves to be brothers and sisters of the dragon, born from the same mother as twins. Who are these people? How can they live in such intimate relationship with the dragon? And what kind of dragon is Komodo? If you are a traveler using Lonely Planet as your Bible, you will get this information about the community in Komodo Island, one of the islands in Komodo National Park. It is a fishing village, still Bugis village filled with goats, chickens, and children. The locals say they are descendants of the convicts exiled to the island by Sumbawanese sultans in the 19th century. And they are used to seeing tourists. So they are indigenous and dangerous, but they are used to see you. Bugis is an ethnic group in South Sulawesi, and the Sumbawanese are from the island of Sumbawa in the western side of the archipelago. It suggests that the Lonely Planet description suggests that they are not indigenous to the island. In similar tone, Wikipedia editors claim that native population in Komodo Island, the Komodo people, has been extinct since 1980s, and they are descendants of convicts mixed with Bugis from Sulawesi. The depiction of Komodo monitor as dragon and local communities as not indigenous runs hand in hand and is reinforced by the fortress conservation and tourism projects imposed by colonial and post-colonial states in the last 100 years. While the monitor has been subject to the protection, expedition, and collections for museums and zoos worldwide, local communities have been considered as threat to the survival of this animal. The most recent intervention to the local people of Komodo and the Komodo monitor's lives takes place in the recent years since 2019. Indonesian government plan to implement new conservation and tourism projects in the island by introducing combination of mass tourism and exclusive tourism for conservation to visit the dragon, and secondly, to relocate Atamodo people to another place. In confronting the plan of eviction and conservation, the local community in Komodo, in strategic collaboration with NGOs, environmentalists, researchers, journalists, and filmmakers, has revitalized and articulated their kinship relationship with Komodo dragon. They argue that long before the formation of National Park, the local community has been living side by side with the ancient reptile in what anthropologists call interspecies companionship. Known in vernacular as Sebae, meaning the other half. The dragon is depicted in the indigenous fable as twins of the Komodo people's ancestors. Their belief system arguably ensures robust practices of human-animal coexistence in the region and thus have contributed, I argue, to the survival of the dragon for millennia. Based on this kinship narrative, the Komodo community claim that they are indigenous to the island and hence should not be relocated. Furthermore, they demand active participation in the new conservation and ecotourism plans initiated by the government and the private companies. In the paper I'm presenting today, I would like to invite you to analyze this new articulation of kinship with the dragon as a form of indigenous multispecies politics in the context of socio-political, economic, and environmental transformation in Indonesia. Especially, this indigenous multispecies politics should be understood in the context of long history of and current projects of conservation and tourism imposed upon the Komodo dragons, its human companion, and their habitat. Drawing for literature from multispecies relationships and indigenous politics, this presentation shows how the tale about human-animal kinship between Komodo dragon and Komodo community may not only reflect the indigenous ontology, but also Atamodo's active agency in negotiating their position with the external interventions. So I will start by providing you with an overview of conservation and tourism projects in the island. And secondly, I will briefly describe the complicated indigenous status of the Atamodo and how their relationship of Komodo dragon is being revitalized. And thirdly, I will analyze how recent indigenous politics of multispecies kinship provides new possibilities for local communities and activist groups to negotiate, engage, and disengage the conservation and tourism projects. And in the final part, I will reflect on the ways these indigenous multispecies politics might inform us about the possibilities of being in the modern human world and in doing other ways of doing conservation and tourism. But before going further, let me introduce you the overall research project and my research methodology. So like Catherine has just explained, that this is part of a postdoctoral project I started a couple of years ago. And the title of the project is Conservation, Ecotourism, and Multispecies Coexistence. And I am now in the process of finishing these 5 chapters or article, and the one today is chapter 4. So in the first part, I look at especially the expeditions to the island and the zoos program, and also the media representation of Komodo dragon in the US, and it will be apparent later why US is very important in this case. And secondly, I look at the way conservation and ecotourism confluent in the 2 days practice of conservation and tourism business. And in chapter 3, I look at the situation in Komodo National Park as a form to study Indonesian state. And I look at I'm trying to understand the rise and the fall of ecotourism in this area as an explanation of the development agenda and conservation agenda of Indonesian state. And in the last part, I'm trying to see the indigenous knowledge and the way they imagine living together with the dragon as an alternative model for the way we can think and doing conservation and ecotourism. Little bit of my methodology. So ethnography is the main one. I spend time in Komodo, but I also follow the archives, including the ones in the expeditions to Komodo dragon, but also the archives of the collections of Komodo dragon in zoos and in museum, and how they follow the story of how they transport or travel internationally. But I'm also part of the local community, and sometimes also engage in some kind of engagement. So it is a kind of what Stuart here is called as engaged anthropology. But I'm originally from the island of Flores, the largest island in this area. So I'm not indigenous to Atamodo because they speak. This is a region where there are so many languages, and even it's only a few hours from my place to the island of Komodo, we speak different language. So I'm a kind of from there, but I think I cannot claim that I'm indigenous to the island because of this complex ethnic and language diversity. So, but I have some connections to there, and that influence my research practice. And of course, it's also a kind of multi-species research. I mean, I don't interview and have FGDs with the dragon, but I do follow them, dead and alive, in Komodo National Park and in the dioramas of museums and zoos worldwide. So now a little bit of background and or the brief history of the conservation and ecotourism in Komodo National Park. So Komodo National Park is located in southeastern Indonesia. So this is the island of Flores, this is Bali, and this is Sulawesi here. Comprising of a terrestrial and marine ecosystem, Komodo Island and its neighboring area were designated as nature reserve by the Dutch colonial administration in 1915 and made a national park by Indonesian government in 1980. Actually, it started in 1977 already with the support of international development organizations. And UN made it as a World Heritage Site as 1988. So today it is not only a conservation area, but it is Indonesia's most popular ecotourism destination. Briefly before the COVID, visitors to the park reached up to 221,000 visitors, and the Indonesian government planned to increase the visitors to reach 1 million visitors per year in the coming years. But Komodo National Park is also home for local communities. There are 3 villages, I mean the government's villages, Komodo, Papagarang, and Pasir Panjang. And Komodo village is in the village of Komodo, and I'm focusing on this community because they are mainly Atamodo with their specific language, while the dominant groups in the 2 other villages are mainly people from other islands. So that's why I decided to focus on Komodo Island. So it is a village with around 2,000 persons in 2020s. Komodo monitor have been subjected to intensive intervention since the discovery by the outside world. Soon after realizing the existence of this animal, the Dutch colonial government designated terrestrial and marine territory around today's Komodo National Park as nature reserve in 1915. Lieutenant Steen van Hensbroek, a Dutch colonial officer in the island of Flores, was the first European to set foot on the island in 1910. During his visit, he killed 2 Komodo dragons and sent their photos and skins to Peter Owens, director of Zoological Museum and Botanical Gardens in Bogor, Batavia, near Jakarta at that time. Based on this information from Hensbroek, Owens published an article in 1912 introducing what he named Varanus komodoensis. This first ever publication about Komodo triggered strong interest in Europe and US and inspired expeditions both for scientific inquiry and for collections for museum and zoological parks. In total, there were 15 expeditions took place between 1910 and 1945, during which Komodo dragon were shot dead and captured, transported and traded in Europe and North America for scientific and economic interests. If you visit American Museum of Natural History today, you will find a diorama of Komodo dragons killed during the Douglas Borden expedition in 1926, the first ever batch of Komodo dragons captured and traded internationally. If you visit Prong Zoo, also in New York, you will not only find collections of Komodo monitors. You will learn that associations of zoos and aquarium across North America and Europe run a program called Komodo Species Survival Plan to breed Komodo monitors, not only to meet the supply of zoos display, but also in anticipation of the extinction of the Komodo dragon in its natural habitat. Currently, there are approximately 200 Komodo monitors under this association. But I guess there are more, so there should be more investigation. The charm of this ancient lizard, combined with the scenic landscape, fantastic underwater life, and the enchanting culture of the various ethnic groups in Flores, have attracted tourists since long time ago. Yet the central government's massive-scale tourism development in recent years creates an unprecedented social and ecological transformation. In addition to the construction of basic tourism infrastructures, government has developed influx of large investment, some of which are granted to operate inside the park. Critical observation to the current development in the parks leads us to conclude that conservation and ecotourism projects have not only dispossessed indigenous communities in their land and marine space for tourism purpose, but also uprooted their indigent identity and conception of as indigenous people. So a brief history of the conservation and ecotourism. In the 80s, it was made national park. And 5 villages, 5 kampongs in the island was pushed to live together in enclaves in what is today Komodo village. And it is on only 17 hectares of enclave inside the park. And the eviction started in the 1980s in the name of conservation. Since then, these people have no land rights until today. Farming and hunting is forbidden, and they have minimum basic services. So for many years, they don't have schools. And the first generations who attend universities are below my age. So school is very recent. In the 1990s, with the international emergence of the so-called ecotourism, they also implemented the ecotourism projects in this island. And the idea is that intensify tourism business in conservation area in order to generate revenue to finance conservation and also to offer development to the local communities. So it is a transition from conservation to ecotourism. But the idea is that, okay, let's exploit this conservation area in order to generate revenue, and we will bring money for conservation and for development. And the TNC was one of the big players, supported by generous finance from World Bank and USA. But the framework is that there should be private company. And in that line of thinking, TNC established a private enterprise called Putrinaga Komodo in collaboration with Indonesian entrepreneur, actually not Indonesian because he's the cousin of Mahathir Mohamad, who changed his citizenship to Indonesia and do this business. And one of the very impactful stems from this area was that there are zoning systems in the national park. They make the so-called utilization zones, including for business, and there are more controls for local populations. So these are the pink area, the local settlements, and this is for conservation, and this is for diving spots. And while local communities are restricted for fishing and farming, this area is open for tourism business, both in the islands, beaches, but also the undermarine tourism. In the recent years, in the current administration of Joko Widodo, they make Flores as the so-called New Bali, and it is a so-called national strategic project. And there are intensive tourism, but there are more investments. So this slide here shows several tourism concessions granted to several companies which are in our investigation closely connected to the political parties and the current government. But this is for tourism concessions. So you can see that while local populations are restricted, the habitat of the Komodo dragon are offered for tourism business, and it is by private enterprises. So let me show you what happened in one part of Komodo Island. So this is the fields of Komodo, 17 hectares, almost 2,000 population. And this is the concession of one of the private company I mentioned earlier. And it is much larger than the concession of than the living space of the local population. And actually this area was settlement and gardens of the local people in community prior to the formation of a national park in the 1980s. And in relation to this intensification of tourism business, maybe this statement by Coordinating Minister of Maritime Investment, the right hand of the current president, says it all. Komodo is the only one in the world. We have to sell. And in regards to the rights of the local population, this is the statement of the governor of East Nusa Tenggara province back in 2019. They do not have land rights like other citizens. They do not have land titles and certificates ownership to the land in Komodo Island. In the national park, there will be no human rights, only animal rights. Now I move to the third part about indigeneity and multispecies conviviality in Komodo National Park. Linguistic evidence shows that Komodo are indigenous to the island. Verheyen, a Dutch anthropologist, linguist, and a Catholic priest, who was an expert on several languages and cultures in the region, so that although Komodo language has some resemblance with other languages in other surrounding islands and ethnic groups, Wanamodo, the name of the language in Komodo, is an independent language group. It has 40% of totally original words in his research. The Komodo, however, is not an isolated society. Before the arrival of tourism, they have engaged in inter-island trade for centuries with tamarind and sea products as their main commodities. They also have embraced Islam. Although indigenous rituals and worships are still maintained to a certain extent, and sometimes in secret, Islam has introduced profound transformation of Komodo community. I will be happy to talk more about this in Q&A. Similarly, the fortress conservation have also brought about changes in their lives. The prohibition of farming and hunting since the 1980s have made them lose many dimensions of their culture, especially their connections to the landscape and other companion animals. As a park community, they became landless and living under the strict control of a park authority, including military and police, financed by international development funds. As a small island society living in the intersection of sea traffic in eastern Indonesia, the traffic that links several bigger islands, Komodo have long interacted with other ethnic groups. Inter-island and inter-ethnic marriage is very common, with men coming from other patrilineal ethnic groups in the surrounding larger islands and stay in Komodo island with their wives. So it is patrilineal marriage, but matrilocal system, because they stay in Komodo island and don't take their wives to their origin ethnic groups. Very few Komodo women move to other islands. Following the patrilineal logic, the contemporary Komodo society identify themselves in relation to the father's clan, which means other ethnic groups. The oldest clan in Komodo, because they arrived in a very early stage, are Sumba, Velak, Munting from Manggarai, my ethnic group, Ambon, and Sebae in Sumbawa. Most of the main clans have their tales of arrival, like tales of Kin City, the Komodo Dragon, which link the clan's territorial boundaries and ritual sites. There are also other clans arrived in the living memory of the people. So apart from the 5 clans, there are also more clans nowadays. In this patrilineal system, their mother's lines are not counted. People concluded that the native Komodo have been extinct years ago. This claim is also supported by the dominant conception of indigeneity that relies on pure blood in designing indigenous identity in many of the debate about indigeneity. In addition to this, interclan village conflicts and competitions, for example, in the local development funds and village elections, and the absence of adat or customary institutions like in other places in Indonesia have made the indigenous claim of Komodo indigenous institutions quite weak. We will see in the next session, however, how, despite of the absence of institutional framework and foundation for indigeneity. Atamodo used the narrative of intimate relationship between human and Komodo dragon to negotiate their position. And it is here that the story of kinship, that human and Komodo dragon are from the same mother, gets its momentum. The fable or the tale of Atamodo and Komodo goes as follows. In the early days of human's life, lived in Komodo two families, Umpudatok and Umpunajo. Umpudatok had a son named Hami, and Umpunajo had a daughter named Eva. From the marriage of Hami and Eva, there born a twin named Gerong, the human, and Ora or Sebae, the dragon. This story, or this mythology, which is rich in symbolism and histories, represents a knowledge system that organizes and inspires a certain form of interspecies relationship, including everyday practice of living together or coexistence. This narrative is considered a mythology, a living archives of indigenous cosmology of human-animal conviviality. I heard stories by elders, including from Magu, one of the Atamodo elders, who says that before hunting was prohibited by National Park, we used to share our hunting game with Sebae. The innards, heads, and bones were for Sebae. We only took the meat. He continues, whenever our dog barks, Sebae will follow. When we got the catcher, they would wait nearby wait for their part. Once we finished taking our part, we would chop the rest and offer it to Komodo dragons. His word choices imply an active act of giving food to domestic animals, such as to a dog in our modern culture. This story is common among Komodo elderly when asked about their hunting practice and their relationship with the dragon. When Atamodo encounters a dragon in their path in the forest, in the surrounding village, they will talk to the dragon. A common expression used is, Sebae, let me pass. This is my path and that is your path. In August 2020, when I interviewed some elderly in their former gardens inside the National Park, a 2-meter-long Komodo approached one of the villagers, and I was really frightened. But one of the villagers speak to the dragon. Sebae, stay there, lay down and listen. And amazingly, the dragon stopped, lay down, and stay quietly there. We are telling the story of our current fate, so the world will know what happened to us. We are recording the stories of how they have lived in the garden, in their garden in the 80s, and how they are evicted and the gardens and houses were burned, and how the police came and killed their dogs to prevent them from hunting. And they believe that by telling these stories to researchers, filmmakers, journalists, they are telling stories when people listen is part of the struggle. Another story is that when Atamodo find a dead body of the dragon in Bas, they will dig a hole and bury respectfully as if similar to the human body. So multi-species scholars would easily conclude that this is indigenous cosmology of multispecies conviviality. Now, the indigenous multispecies politics. In response to the plan to relocate their homes for a new conservation and tourism investments in 2019, Komodo have refashioned and articulated their kinship with the dragon in a political way. The narrative of being a twin of the dragon has been since then articulated in the written and verbal statements in political rallies and petitions. There were a lot of series of demonstrations organized locally during that time, including they destroy the construction sites of the investments, preventing the constructions of the new resorts and hotels. And amazingly, there was a moment when Komodo dragon in Rincha Island confront a trap from these construction sites. And luckily, one of the villagers take the photo, and the photo went viral globally. And it was the time when the investment in Komodo National Park reached global attention. Like humans and dragons confronting investments. Another bold manifestation of the kinship is a mural or a painting displayed in the entrance of the Komodo village, which depicted the story of kinship. The kinship relation with the dragon since then has become new foundation for articulation of political, economic, and environmental claims. In the statement delivered in the 2015 to Indonesian President, the Komodo community made this statement. We, the people of Komodo, the citizens and sovereign owner of the land and sea in Komodo, reject the government plan to evict and relocate us from our ancestors' land to different islands. They also claim to be their rights to be recognized as indigenous people, and then to be active participants of conservation task force, but also to get involved in the tourism economy. In their effort to consolidate the community, several activist groups led by mostly young people, and with the support of NGOs and activist groups, initiated the so-called Komodo Cultural Center, articulating that there are people with culture. They built a small house to collect all kinds of materials they can find to support their claims as indigenous. And they asked people like me to collect materials from museum to have their history, because they are made as people without history, while they know that there are people who collect their stories elsewhere. Last year, they also started Komodo Cultural Center. They also started the so-called Komodo Cultural Festival, and the second one will be held next month. They also organized their own tourist package in the island to have, and it is in opposition to the larger plans by the government to have wildlife tourism run by professional companies. So they have their tour guide in the village and trekking to the surrounding area. And one of the leaders said that, the young leader said that we want to promote to the world that that here in Komodo Island, Komodo and Sebae live side by side. Here is nature and culture together. They also revitalized the indigenous religious sites like the one just next to the, so you can see this, this is part of the ritual sites. So the articulation of kinship relationship with the dragon is a form of indigenous and multi-species politics. As twin of the dragon, born from the same mother, Atamodo create a cosmology and history that frames them as people with indigenous roots. They conceptualize an intimate connection and sustained relationship with the protected charismatic animal, and hence should be allowed to coexist there. It is a practice of being together in place, indigenous coexistence in more than human world. Here I quote Larson and Johnson, that serves the global the goal of place making and defense this human-animal conviviality. In confronting the modernist conservation and capitalist expansion through tourism and conservation, they rely on their indigenous cosmologies of human and animal kinship as a basis for defending their existence and livelihood. This indigenous multi-species politics is initiated through efforts to build an understanding of the past through fables, ceremonies, songs, and histories, cultural festival, community center that offers them a possibility for a specific attachment to the territory and their relationships with other species, especially Komodo. It plays vital role in their self-perception, worldview, and understanding of history. To borrow James Clifford's word, here Atamodo returns to the indigenous cosmologies, an act of homecoming, recover and renew their roots, and use it to argue for their relatedness and coexistence with Komodo monitor. We could call this as a cosmopolitics, similar to the ones observed by people like Marisol de la Cadena in Peru and Ecuador. Challenging the separation of nature and culture prevalent in modern conservation paradigm, Atamodo proposed a different paradigm of indigeneity that not only rely on their experience as marginal groups, like in other indigenous politics in Indonesia, but also the conjuncture of non-human and human actors in political arena. Quote from De La Cadena. Others might, like Mario Blaser, might call it political ontology, a framework that allows us to see and understand an emergence of other ontologies. Yet I argue that it is not enough to see the multiplicities of ontologies at play in Komodo National Park. The emergence, or rather the rearticulation of Atamodo's ontology should be historicized, namely when this articulation of ontology takes place under certain context. Here, the literature of indigenous politics is helpful. In the case of Atamodo, the indigenous multi-species politics should be understood as an act of positioning, Danieli and Suarcol, especially in relation to the power of state and corporations that arrive in the island through conservation and tourism projects. Such articulation serves the purpose of delegitimizing the hegemonic power and on one hand, and on the other hand, consolidating their own agency and as local champions of conservation and other ways of doing livelihood. While the hegemonic power of the state and corporate actors relies on the separation of human and animal and nature and control overboard, indigenous agency that Atamodo articulates rests on the narrative of intimate human-animal conviviality and solidarity. The indigenous multi-species politics also helped challenge the overall neoliberal and tourism model in the same of, and at the same time promoting alternatives for community-based tourism. As I am running out of time, I will just do the conclusion now and we can discuss more later. So, the Komodo community at Komodo offers us an important paradigm for multi-species relationships in our modern human world. Whether this can lead to a radical change, I believe, relates not only to the ability of a Komodo community to have political articulations, but also depends on the engagement of the community of practitioners and scholars like us, whether we want to take indigenous knowledge systems seriously and make radical changes in the way we think about and do conservation and tourism development.